Jack Miller floated through the curved hallway of Station Liberty, his magnetic boots clicking softly against the metal floor when he chose to touch down. After 8 years as a Marine and 3 years stationed in orbit, he still loved the feeling of controlled weightlessness. The station spun just enough to create a hint of gravity, but not enough to keep anyone firmly planted without mag boots. Staff Sergeant Miller to command deck, his comm unit crackled. Priority message. Jack sighed and pushed off the wall, propelling himself toward the transit tube. The day had been quiet, too quiet. In his experience, priority messages never brought good news. When he arrived at command, the atmosphere was tense. Colonel Patricia Wells stood at the main viewport, her back straight as a steel rod as she stared out at the approaching vessel. It was unlike anything Jack had ever seen, a massive ship shaped like a spiraling cone with pulsing blue lights along its surface. "Miller, good," Colonel Wells said without turning. "The impossible has happened. We have visitors." "Visitors, ma'am?" Jack asked, though he already understood. "First contact, Staff Sergeant, and you're our welcoming committee." Jack blinked. "With respect, ma'am, I'm security, not a diplomat." The colonel finally turned, her face tight with stress. "The UN Security Council is 8 hours away by shuttle. We have less than 2. They specifically requested military personnel for the initial meeting, something about respecting warrior cultures. Your combat record and your degree in anthropology make you the only logical choice." 3 hours later, Jack stood in the newly prepared conference room, trying not to fidget with his dress uniform as the airlock cycled. His 4-person security team looked just as nervous, though they hid it well. "Remember," Jack said quietly, "no sudden movements. Keep your hands visible. Follow standard first contact protocol." The inner door hissed open, and Jack felt his breath catch. The aliens, the Vexery, according to their transmission, were tall, at least 7 feet. Their bodies were covered in a shiny green-blue exoskeleton that looked both flexible and tough. Each had 4 arms and a face dominated by compound eyes that shifted colors like oil on water. Their mouths were small and surrounded by tiny moving parts that reminded Jack of insect mandibles. The lead Vexery stepped forward, a device at its throat emitting a soft hum. "Greetings, humans of Earth. I am Ambassador Tixvar of the Collective. Vexery worlds, we come in peace and curiosity." Jack stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Ambassador, I am Staff Sergeant Jack Miller of the United Earth Marine Corps. On behalf of humanity, welcome to Station Liberty." The meeting began smoothly. Enough, the Vexery sat stiffly in the specially designed chairs, their 4 arms always in careful, deliberate motion. Through their translation devices, they explained they had been observing Earth for several years, learning languages and customs before making contact. "Your species is young but remarkably adaptive," Ambassador Tixvar said. "We wish to establish diplomatic relations and perhaps limited technological exchange." As the conversation continued, Jack noticed the Vexery seemed uncomfortable with his hand gestures. Every time he moved too quickly, their compound eyes flashed red momentarily. He tried to keep still, but years of military habit made that difficult. "These energy conversion systems you mention," Jack said, leaning forward slightly, "what exactly would you want in exchange?" The ambassador's aide, a Vexery with darker coloring, chittered something in their native language, a sound like rocks. In a tumbler, the ambassador's eyes shifted to a deep purple. "We seek only biological data," the ambassador replied. "Your species' cellular structure is unique in our experience. Most particularly your healing capabilities." Something about the way the translator rendered the word healing made Jack uneasy. "I'm not authorized to discuss biological exchanges. When the diplomatic team arrives—" "Is it true," interrupted the dark-colored aide, "that human warriors continue fighting after sustaining injuries that would incapacitate most sentient life?" Jack frowned. "We're trained to push through pain, yes, but we're not superhuman." The aide stepped closer, its 4 hands moving in complex patterns. "Our observations suggest otherwise. We have records of your military conflicts. Your kind sustains damage and continues. This is not normal." "Crab sail enough," the ambassador said sharply. This is not the approach we agreed upon. Jack stood up slowly, sensing the shift in mood. Perhaps we should take a short break. Show us, Kravzil demanded, moving even closer. Show us how you heal. The security team tensed, hands moving toward their sidearms. Jack held up his hand to stop them. That's not going to happen. I think we should. Everything happened too fast after that. Kravzil reached for what looked like a ceremonial object on his belt. One of Jack's security team, Private Nelson, shouted a warning. The ambassador made a high-pitched trilling sound that the translator couldn't process. And then Kravzil was moving with shocking speed, the object now clearly a blade slashing across Jack's chest. The pain was immediate and intense. Jack staggered backward, feeling the warm rush of blood soaking through his uniform. Through the shock, he heard shouting, saw his team subduing the alien attacker. The room spun as he collapsed to his knees. "Get the doctor!" someone yelled. Jack pressed his hand against the wound, feeling it deep and long across his torso. The cut would have been deadly, but even as darkness crept into the edges of his vision, something else happened. The pain changed. It transformed into something hot and electric. Rage flooded through him, not just at being attacked, but at the failure of this historic moment, at the danger now facing his team and possibly all of humanity. His heart pounded, each beat sending not weakness but strength through his limbs. Dr. Susan Wright reached him first, her medkit already open. "Don't move, Jack. The wound is—" She stopped, staring at where his blood-soaked uniform had been cut open. "That's impossible." Jack looked down. The gaping wound was already closing, not with the slow process of normal healing, but with a visible, almost aggressive regeneration. Tiny arcs of energy, like microscopic lightning, jumped across the closing flesh. Across the room, the restrained Kravzil made a sound that needed no translation, pure astonishment. "The warrior heals," the alien said through the translator. "No, not healing ... something else." Ambassador Tixvar moved closer, compound eyes shifting to a yellow-white color Jack hadn't seen before. "Fascinating. It is as the ancient texts described. They do not heal, they rage." Jack tried to stand, surprised to find he could. The wound still hurt, but it was already half closed. The bleeding nearly stopped. He looked at the aliens, seeing them with new eyes, not as diplomatic partners, but as potential threats who had just learned something important about humans. Something they clearly hadn't expected. "I think," Jack said slowly, "we need to have a very different conversation." No. 3 days passed since the attack. Jack Miller sat on the edge of the examination table in the medical bay while Dr. Susan Wright ran another scan over his chest. The wound that should have killed him was now just a thin pink line across his torso. "I still don't understand it," Susan said, studying the readings on her tablet. "Your cells aren't just healing, they're changing." Jack pulled his shirt back on. "Changing how?" "They're stronger, more resilient. The tissue where you were cut is now tougher than the surrounding area." She put down her tablet and looked at him directly. "Jack, this isn't normal human healing. This is something else." The door to the medical bay slid open. Colonel Wells entered, followed by a Vexary that Jack hadn't seen before. This one was smaller than Ambassador Tixvar, with a pale blue exoskeleton and eyes that shifted between green and yellow. "Staff Sergeant Miller, this is Dr. Zivlax, the chief xenobiologist from the Vexary ship," Colonel Wells said. Her voice was tight, professional. "The ambassador has apologized for the incident and offered Dr. Zivlax's expertise to help us understand what happened." Jack stiffened. "With respect, ma'am, I'm not eager to be studied by the same people who tried to kill me." "Kravzil has been confined to our vessel," the alien said, its translator producing a softer voice than the others. "His actions were unauthorized and deeply regrettable. I am here to share knowledge, not gather it." Susan crossed her arms. "Then perhaps you can explain why your colleague seems so interested in human healing." Dr. Zivlax moved closer to the examination table, all 4 hands making small, precise gestures. "Because it is not healing at all by our understanding, may I?" The alien held up a small device. Colonel Wells nodded, and Dr. Zivlax ran the device over Jack's chest where the wound had been. The device projected a holographic image that showed his cells at a microscopic level. In all our studies of life across 17 star systems, we have never seen this, Dr. Zivlax explained. Your cells do not simply repair damage. They convert emotional energy, specifically rage, into physical regeneration. Jack frowned. That doesn't make any sense. Emotions aren't energy. For humans they are, the alien replied. Your brains produce unique neurochemicals during strong emotional states. When you experience rage, your body releases compounds that trigger this regenerative response. It is not biology, it is energy conversion. Susan moved closer to examine the hologram. That's impossible. Yet it is happening, Dr. Zivlax said. We have legends of such beings in our ancient texts, warriors who grew stronger from battle, not weaker. We dismiss them as myths. Now we know they were early encounters with humans. Colonel Wells cleared her throat. The UN Security Council has arrived on station. They've called an emergency meeting to discuss these findings. Both of you are expected to attend. The meeting room was tense. Representatives from major Earth governments sat on one side of the table, while Ambassador Tixvar and two other Vexari sat on the other. Jack, Susan, and Dr. Zivlax stood at the front, presenting their findings. So you're telling us that humans have some kind of rage-powered healing ability? Asked Admiral Diane Foster, the American representative. Not just healing, Dr. Zivlax corrected. Enhancement? The damaged tissue becomes stronger. With repeated injury and regeneration, a human could theoretically develop extraordinary physical capabilities. The Chinese representative leaned forward. Has this been observed before? Susan nodded. Actually, yes. We've reviewed medical records of soldiers who survived seemingly fatal injuries and made remarkable recoveries. There are cases of mothers lifting vehicles off trapped children. We've always attributed these to adrenaline or hidden strength, but now, this changes everything we know about human potential, Jack added. And it explains why the Vexari were so interested in us. Ambassador Tixvar's eyes shifted to a deep blue. We came seeking diplomatic relations, but we must be honest. When our long-range scans detected this energy pattern in humans, many in our government saw potential weapons applications. Others saw medical breakthroughs. I sought the middle path, open contact and mutual exchange. And Kravziel? Jack asked. He represents our military faction. They wish to confirm the regenerative capability firsthand. The ambassador's mandibles clicked softly. His methods were unacceptable, but his curiosity was shared by many. Admiral Foster stood up. This meeting is now classified at the highest level. No one discusses these findings outside this room until we have a better understanding of the implications. Later that evening, Jack stood at the viewport in his quarters, looking out at the massive Vexari ship. His chest itched where the wound had been, a constant reminder of how much had changed in just a few days. His door chimed. "Enter," he called. Susan walked in, carrying a tablet. "I've been reviewing the data from Dr. Zivlax's scans. There's something you need to see." She placed the tablet on his desk and brought up a series of images. "These are cellular samples from your wound over the past 3 days. Look at this pattern here. It's not just repairing. The cells are evolving." Jack studied the images. Even with his limited medical knowledge, he could see the difference. The new cells looked more complex, more organized. "What does it mean?" he asked. "It means this isn't just a healing factor, it's an adaptive response." Susan looked up at him, her expression serious. "Jack, I think this is why humanity has survived so much hardship throughout our history. We don't just endure damage, we get stronger from it." Jack's unit beeped urgently. "Staff Sergeant Miller to command, emergency protocol." They rushed to the command deck. Colonel Wells stood before a large display showing multiple new ships appearing near the original Vexari vessel. "The Vexari just received reinforcements," she said grimly. 7 ships, all larger than the first. And they're deploying something in Earth orbit. On the screen, small objects detached from the alien vessels, descending toward Earth's atmosphere. We're tracking 20 research pods heading for various locations on Earth, a technician reported. The Vexery claimed they're atmospheric sampling devices approved by the UN. Jack felt a chill run through him. Did the UN actually approve this? Colonel Wells shook her head. Not according to Admiral Foster. Dr. Zivlax entered the command deck, moving quickly. You must stop those pods. They are not sampling devices. What are they? Susan demanded. Testing equipment, the alien xenobiologist said. The military faction has taken control of our mission. They wish to determine if all humans share this regenerative capability or if Staff Sergeant Miller is unique. Jack stared at the screen as the pods continued their descent toward Earth. How exactly do they plan to test this? Dr. Zivlax's compound eyes shifted to a deep red. By causing injury and measuring the response on a planetary scale. Alarms blared throughout Station Liberty as Earth's defense systems went on high alert. The Vexery pods had already entered the atmosphere, heading for major population centers across the globe. Can we shoot them down? Jack asked, watching the tracking display as red dots descended toward Earth. Colonel Wells shook her head. Not all of them, not in time. And we don't know what would happen if we did. They might release something worse. Dr. Zivlax moved quickly. Between the human officers, all 4 hands working on a small device. I am sending the override codes to stop the pods, but the military faction may have changed them. Susan grabbed Jack's arm. We need to warn people. If these pods are designed to cause injuries. Too late, a technician called out. First pod has landed in Sydney, Australia. The main screen switched to a news feed from Sydney. In a busy downtown park, a metallic sphere about the size of a car had landed. Curious people gathered around it. Suddenly, the sphere opened like a flower, releasing a pale mist into the air. People began coughing, then screaming as red welts appeared. On their exposed skin, what is that? Jack demanded, turning to Dr. Zivlax. A mild cellular irritant, the alien explained, eyes shifting to a sickly yellow. It causes surface damage to test regenerative response. It should not be fatal. Should not be? Susan was furious. You're experimenting on innocent people. More feeds appeared on the screen. Similar scenes played out in London, Moscow, Cairo, and Rio de Janeiro. In each location, people exposed to the mist showed signs of pain and injury, but something else was happening too. The cameras zoomed in on several victims whose welts were already fading, their skin returning to normal much faster than should be possible. It's working, Dr. Zivlax said quietly. The regenerative response is present in most subjects, just as we theorized. Jack watched in horror and fascination. All those people are healing like I did? Not all, the alien noted. Approximately 60% show accelerated recovery. The rest heal at normal biological rates. But the interesting pattern is emerging in the emotional response. On screen, the scene in Sydney was changing. The people who healed quickly weren't running away, they were angry. Some were throwing rocks at the pod. Others were helping those still suffering from the mist's effects. Their faces showed not fear, but rage. The strong emotional response triggers the energy conversion, Dr. Zivlax explained. Those who respond with fear heal normally. Those who respond with anger heal rapidly and show enhanced strength. Colonel Wells was on the come with Earth Defense Forces. All stations neutralize those pods immediately. Use foam containment to seal them. The UN Secretary-General is calling for an emergency session, a communications officer reported. And the President is asking for a direct line to the Vexery ship? Jack turned to Dr. Zivlax. You need to get us on that ship. We have to stop. This before it gets worse. The alien hesitated. The military faction controls the vessel now. I was only able to come here because of my research status. Then get us on as research subjects, Susan suggested. Tell them you want to bring the original specimen for further study. Dr. Zivlax's eyes flashed green briefly. That might work. But once aboard, we would be at significant risk. Jack looked back at the screens showing chaos spreading across Earth. It's a risk we have to take. 2 hours later, a small shuttle approached the massive Vexery mothership. Inside, Jack and Susan sat across from Dr. Zyvlax, who was piloting the craft. They had been given temporary translator devices that fit behind their ears. "Remember," Dr. Zyvlax instructed, "keep your emotions controlled." The Vexry military faction sees your emotional capacity as a weapon. Do not give them reason to fear you more than they already do. The shuttle docked with the alien ship. When the airlock opened, they were met by 4 Vexry guards, each holding what looked like energy weapons. "Researcher Zyvlax," one guard said through its translator, "you were not authorized to return with human specimens." "Commander Kravzil will want to see this one," Zyvlax replied, gesturing to Jack. "He is the original subject. His regenerative capabilities have evolved further since the initial contact." The guards chittered among themselves, then motioned for the group to follow. Jack tried not to stare at the interior of the alien vessel. The corridors were wide and tall, with curved walls that glowed with soft blue light. The air smelled slightly sweet, like flowers mixed with metal. They were led to a large chamber filled with screens showing Earth. Kravzil stood in the center, his dark exoskeleton gleaming under the lights. He turned as they entered, his compound eyes shifting to a deep purple when he saw Jack. "The warrior returns," Kravzil said. "Have you come to offer yourself for study? Or for revenge?" Jack kept his face neutral. "I came to understand why you're attacking my people." "Not attacking, testing, learning." Kravzil moved closer, examining Jack. "Your species represents something unique in our experience. A biological weapon system powered by emotional energy." Susan stepped forward. "We're not weapons, we're people." "People who grow stronger when damaged," Kravzil responded. "People who could potentially become unstoppable in warfare. The data from our pods confirms it. When provoked, humans don't just heal, they evolve." Dr. Zyvlax moved to one of the screens. "The tests have proven the theory. We should stop now before relations are permanently damaged." Kravzil made a dismissive gesture with his upper arms. "Relations? We are not seeking diplomatic ties anymore. We are assessing a threat." He turned to Jack. "Your kind has been fighting wars throughout your history. Imagine what you would become if you fully understood this power. You would be unstoppable." On the screens, the situation on Earth was escalating. Military forces had contained some pods, but others continued to release their mist. And something new was happening? In areas where the exposure had occurred first, the recovered victims were organizing. Not running or hiding, but gathering together, their faces set with determination. "You're making a mistake," Jack warned. "Humans don't just get angry individually. We get angry collectively. And right now, you're making a lot of people very, very angry." As if to prove his point, one screen showed a group of civilians in London surrounding a pod. Their skin still showed healing welts, but they moved with surprising strength, lifting and throwing the metal sphere into the Thames River. Kravzil watched, his eyes shifting rapidly between colors. "Fascinating. The collective response amplifies the effect." He turned to his guards. "Prepare the suppression field. We need to neutralize their emotional capability before proceeding with full study protocols." Jack caught Susan's eye. They both understood what full study protocols likely meant. Jack felt his anger rising, and with it, a strange tingling sensation throughout his body, the energy conversion that Dr. Zyvlax had described. "What exactly is a suppression field?" Susan asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Kravzil's mandibles clicked in what might have been satisfaction. "A wavelength that disrupts the neurochemical processes that fuel your rage. Without emotional energy, you cannot regenerate. Without regeneration, you are just ordinary biological entities, easily controlled, easily studied." Dr. Zyvlax stepped between them. "This violates all scientific ethics. The Council will not approve." "The Council? The Council is not here," Kravzil replied. "And by the time they arrive, we will have all the data we need." On the screens, more pods were opening across Earth, and in orbit, the 7 Vexry ships were moving into position around the planet, preparing to deploy something much larger than the testing pods. Jack felt the rage building inside him, but this time he didn't fight it. He let it grow, feeling the energy spreading through his body, making him stronger. He looked at Susan and saw the same realization in her eyes. The Vexery had made a critical mistake. They thought they were studying a weakness, but they were actually awakening humanity's greatest strength. Jack felt his heartbeat quicken as the rage flowed through him. His muscles tensed, and the small cuts on his hands from earlier closed before his eyes. Beside him, Susan's face showed the same transformation, her eyes bright with anger and determination. "Commander," one of the Vexery guards called out, "we're detecting energy fluctuations from the human male." Kravzil turned sharply. "Restrain them, now!" The guards moved quickly, raising their weapons. Jack didn't think he reacted. He lunged forward with speed that surprised even him, grabbing the nearest guard's weapon and twisting it away. The alien's exoskeleton made a cracking sound as Jack pushed him into the second guard. Susan grabbed a metal tool from a nearby table and swung it at the third guard. Connecting with enough force to send the alien stumbling backward, Dr. Zivlax moved to a control panel and began working all four hands across the surface. "I can." "Delay the suppression field deployment," the scientist called out, but not for long. Kravzil backed away, his eyes shifting rapidly between red and yellow. "This is exactly what we feared, you see? They become more dangerous when threatened." Jack advanced on the commander, feeling stronger with each step. "We become what we need to be. Right now, we need to be strong enough to stop you." On the screens around them, the situation on Earth continued to escalate. In cities across the globe, recovered victims of the pods were gathering in larger groups. Military forces were deploying, but instead of fighting the civilians, many soldiers were joining them. The collective anger was spreading. "The response is stronger than predicted," a Vexery technician reported. "Human emotional energy is increasing exponentially in affected areas," Kravzil hissed an order. "Deploy the suppression field now." "Too late," Dr. Zivlax said. "I've locked out the primary controls." The scientist turned to Jack and Susan. "But the secondary controls are on the bridge. He can still activate them from there." Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Jack looked at the screens and saw small Earth vessels rising from the planet fighter jets and space-capable military, craft launching toward the Vexery ships. "Your people attack us?" Kravzil seemed genuinely surprised. "What did you expect?" Susan asked. "You just assaulted civilians across our planet." Jack grabbed Kravzil by one of his upper arms. "Take us to the bridge, now." The commanders. Mandibles clicked rapidly, but he nodded. "This way." They moved through the curving corridors of the alien ship, Jack keeping a firm grip on Kravzil while Susan and Dr. Zivlax followed. Twice they encountered other Vexery, but the sight of their commander being held by a human made them back away quickly. "The bridge is ahead," Dr. Zivlax said as they approached a large circular door. The door slid open to reveal a vast chamber filled with Vexery working at various stations. A curved window at the front showed Earth below and the approaching human vessels. All activity stopped as they entered. "Commander Kravzil," one of the bridge officers began, then fell silent at the sight of Jack holding the commander. "Tell them to recall the pods and stand down," Jack ordered, tightening his grip slightly. Kravzil's exoskeleton creaked under the pressure. "You cannot win this conflict, human. Our technology is far superior to yours." "Maybe," Jack agreed, "but you made one big mistake. You made us angry, all of us." He gestured toward the view screen, where the Earth vessels continued to approach. "And now you're seeing what happens when humans get angry together." On one of the screens, something unexpected was happening. In the areas most heavily affected by the pods, the recovered humans weren't just organizing, they were changing. Their movements were faster, more coordinated. Some were lifting objects that should have been too heavy for them. Others were showing reflexes that seemed almost superhuman. "What's happening to them?" Susan asked, moving closer to the screen. Dr. Zivlax studied the readings. The irritant from the pods caused damage. The rage triggered regeneration. That the collective emotional response is amplifying the effect beyond our predictions. They're not just healing, they're evolving. Impossible, Kravzeel whispered. No species can evolve that quickly. No species you've encountered before. Jack corrected him. A shudder ran through the ship as something struck it. The view screen showed Earth fighters firing on the Vexery vessels. Another screen showed a large military ship approaching. Station Liberty, where Colonel Wells was coordinating with Earth Defense Forces. This has gone too far, Dr. Zivlak said. Commander, you must order a withdrawal before this becomes a full-scale war. Kravzeel's eyes shifted to a deep blue. The High Council will never approve retreat. They sent us to assess and contain a potential threat. That is what we must do. Your pods and tests have only made the threat worse, Susan pointed out. You wanted to see our regenerative abilities? Well, now you're seeing what happens when you push us too far. On the screens, more changes were visible. The Earth military vessels were coordinating in ways that seemed too precise, too quick. And on the ground, the recovered victims were no longer just angry, they were focused, purposeful. What is that? Jack asked, pointing to a large device. Being prepared in the center of the bridge. The suppression field emitter, Dr. Zivlak explained. It will broadcast a wave that disrupts the neurochemical processes that fuel your emotional responses. Without emotion, you cannot generate the energy needed for your unique healing. Susan moved toward the device. We need to destroy it. Guards. Kravzeel called out. Several Vexery moved to block Susan's path. Jack felt the rage inside him growing stronger. With a sudden surge of strength, he lifted Kravzeel completely off the floor and threw him into the guards. The aliens tumbled. Together in a tangle of limbs and exoskeletons, more guards rushed forward. Jack met them head-on, moving with speed and strength he'd never possessed before. Each blow he took only seemed to make him stronger as his body instantly healed and adapted. Susan had reached the suppression device and was trying to figure out how to disable it. I need help here. Dr. Zivlak rushed to her side, all four hands working quickly over the controls. There's a failsafe. If I can just... A blast from a guard's weapon hit the scientist in the back. Dr. Zivlak stumbled forward, blue fluid leaking from the wound. Get down! Jack shouted, diving toward Susan as more weapon fire crossed the bridge. The ship shuddered. Again, as Earth forces continued their attack. Warning lights flashed across all control panels. Hull breach in Section 4, a Vexery officer reported. Shields failing. Kravzeel had regained his feet. Activate the suppression field now. Full power. A Vexery technician reached for the controls. Susan lunged for him, but wasn't fast enough. The technician pressed a sequence of symbols, and the device began to hum with increasing intensity. Too late, Kravzeel said, his mandibles clicking in what might have been the alien equivalent of a smile. In moments, your emotional energy will be neutralized. Your regenerative abilities will fail, and then we will learn all your secrets. The device glowed brighter, the hum becoming a high-pitched whine. Jack felt a wave of weakness wash over him, the rage that had been fueling him starting to fade. Susan grabbed his arm. Don't give up. Fight it. Jack closed his eyes, focusing on his anger, trying to hold on to it against the growing numbness. He thought of Earth, of all the innocent people being used as test subjects, of the arrogance of the Vexery thinking they could control human emotion. The wounded Dr. Zivlak crawled toward them. The field ... it has a resonance frequency. If overloaded ... it will collapse. Jack opened his eyes, a new understanding dawning. You mean if we get angry enough ... The alien scientist's eyes flickered green briefly. Precisely. More emotion ... more energy ... System overload. Susan gripped Jack's hand. Then let's get angry, really angry. Together they faced Kravzeel and his crew, drawing on every bit of rage they could muster not just for themselves, but for all of humanity under attack. Jack and Susan stood side by side on the Vexery bridge, fighting against the numbing effect of the suppression field. The humming device grew louder, pushing against their emotions, trying to flatten their rage into nothing. Think about what? They did, Susan urged, her voice strained. All those people on Earth, used as test subjects, hurt for an experiment? Jack nodded, clenching his fists. He thought of the pods, the mist, the screaming civilians. He thought of the arrogance of Kravzale and his crew treating humans like lab animals. He let the memories fuel his anger, pushing back against the deadening field. It's not working, Kravzale said, watching them struggle. Your emotional energy cannot overcome our technology. Dr. Zivilak, still leaking blue fluid from the wound. In his back, crawled closer to Jack and Susan. Not alone, the scientist whispered, but together ... with others ... Jack suddenly understood. He turned to one of the screens showing Earth. Everywhere, humans affected by the pods were fighting against the suppression field too. Millions of people, all angry, all pushing back with the same energy that powered their regeneration. We need to connect with them, Jack said to Susan. All of us together. Susan looked puzzled for a moment, then her eyes widened. The translator devices? She touched the small device behind her ear. They work both ways. They're already connected to the ship's systems? Dr. Zivlax nodded weakly. Yes, communication. Network ... planet-wide. Jack touched his own translator. Can we send a message through these? To everyone on Earth with the regenerative ability? Theoretically, the alien scientist said, the pods. They left trace elements, create temporary network. Connected to our systems? Susan turned to one of the control panels. Show me how. While Kravzale and his guards were distracted by more impacts from Earth's military vessels, Dr. Zivilax guided Susan through a series of commands on the Vexery interface. Jack stood ready, holding back the guards who tried to approach. Done, Susan finally said. We're connected. Now what? Jack closed his eyes. Now we get angry, together. He focused on the translator device, imagining his rage flowing through it, connecting with every human affected by the pods. He pictured his anger as a red flame, spreading from person to person across the globe, growing stronger as it traveled. On the screens, something remarkable began to happen. The humans on Earth stopped their individual struggles. Their movements became synchronized. Their faces showed the same expression, not just anger, but purpose, determination. The suppression field device began to whine at a higher pitch. Sparks flew from its surface. Impossible, Kravzale said, backing away. The field is at maximum power. So are we, Jack replied, his voice strangely calm despite the rage flowing through him. The ship shuddered again as more Earth vessels attacked. But now there was something else, a wave of energy flowing back from the planet, visible on the Vexery sensors as a red tide washing over their ships. What is happening? One of the bridge officers cried out. Dr. Zivlax's eyes shimmered with green light. They're feeding back the energy ... billions of humans ... channeling their collective emotional response back through our network. The suppression field device began to smoke. Cracks appeared in its surface as the overload built. Kravzale rushed toward it, trying to shut it down manually, but it was too late. With a deafening bang, the device exploded. The wave of energy knocked everyone on the bridge off their feet. Jack and Susan were thrown against a wall but felt no pain. Their bodies instantly healed any damage. When the smoke cleared, Jack saw that the Vexery were in disarray. The explosion had damaged several control systems, and alarms blared throughout the ship. On the screens, the other Vexery vessels were also showing signs of damage as the same energy overload cascaded through their connected systems. What have you done? Kravzale demanded, struggling to his feet. We showed you what humans are really capable of, Jack said. Not just as individuals, but together. The main view screen flickered, then showed the face of Colonel Wells on the bridge of an Earth military vessel. Vexery command ship? This is Colonel Patricia Wells of Earth Defense Force. Your fleet is surrounded and your systems are compromised. Surrender now or be destroyed. Kravzale looked at the screens showing his damaged fleet, then at Jack and Susan, who stood unharmed despite everything. The commander's eyes shifted to a deep blue, a color Jack now recognized as resignation. We surrender, Kravzil said quietly. 3 days later, Jack stood in a conference room on Station Liberty. Earth representatives sat across from Ambassador Tixvar, who had returned from the Vexery homeworld to negotiate peace terms. Kravzil and his military faction had been removed from command and were facing judgment from their own people. The High Council wishes to express our deepest regrets, Ambassador Tixvar said, eyes shifting to a respectful green. We came, seeking knowledge, not conflict. Commander Kravzil's actions were unauthorized and unforgivable. President Lavra Chun nodded. We accept your apology, Ambassador. But we need assurances this will never happen again. You have them, the Ambassador replied. We have learned a valuable lesson about your species, one we will not forget. Jack listened as the diplomats worked out the details of a peace agreement. Dr. Susan Wright sat beside him, reviewing data from the incident on her tablet. The changes are permanent, she whispered to Jack. Everyone affected by the pod still has the enhanced regenerative ability, and it's spreading naturally through the population. Within a generation, most humans will have it. Is that a good thing? Jack asked. Susan looked thoughtful. It means we'll be stronger, more resilient. But it also means we need to be careful about our emotions, especially anger. Dr. Zivlax, now recovered from his injury, joined them. Your species has unlocked something remarkable, the scientist said. Not just healing, but directed evolution. You adapt to challenges not just over generations, but within a single lifetime. And that's why the Vexery were so interested in us, Jack said. Why they were so afraid. The alien nodded. Yes, but fear is not the foundation for understanding. That was our mistake. Dr. Zivlax's eyes shifted to a bright green. With your permission, I would like to stay on Earth as a scientific liaison, to study this phenomenon properly with full consent and cooperation. President Chun overheard and turned toward them. That could be arranged, Doctor. In fact, I think an exchange of scientific knowledge would benefit both our peoples. As the meeting continued, Jack walked to the viewport and looked out at Earth. Somewhere down there, millions of people were discovering new abilities, learning to control their emotions in ways they never had before. Humanity was changing, evolving, before his eyes. A scar on his palm caught his attention, the last remaining mark from his fight on the Vexery ship. He could have healed it completely, but he chose to keep it as a reminder, not of the rage that powered his regeneration, but of what humans could accomplish when they worked together. The day aliens learned humans regenerate out of pure rage was the day humanity discovered its true strength not as individuals, but as a unified force capable of amazing things. And as Jack looked out at the stars, he wondered what other discoveries awaited them there.